your pride should be rooted in our duty to each other and what we do as far as neighbors, the rights and stuff that are enshrined.
Listening to Good Faith Weekly, I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture.
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
For inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up after our brief stint up in Boston, Massachusetts. And then later on in the pod, we sat down with Robert Arnold, writer, poet, speaker, and activist. He's got a new book out titled Defiance Till Death. It's a good pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
I'm well.
Good.
Hey, sorry about your Red Sox, man.
Oh, why? Why would you start off this pod with such devastating, heartbreaking news?
Because I needed a segue.
Well, if that means making a sacrifice for your segue, then go right ahead. Yes, my Red Sox got beat.
So speaking of losers.
Oh, God. I mean, kick me while I'm down.
That's right. Speaking of losers, I just have to brag for a moment about our trip last weekend and how I just killed it.
On?
Golf.
Oh my gosh. Yes, indeed.
So as we mentioned last week in our episode, we took a quick trip up to Boston to see our son for his birthday. And while we were there, he asked to go to one of these like golf simulator things.
Yes, lots of fun.
Okay. I've never played golf in my life.
No, you have not.
No. In fact, I told you guys both the last time I tried to swing a golf club was in third grade PE, and I could not even make contact with the ball. It was a horrible experience. I had no interest in playing golf. But again, the kiddo wants to go play golf, so by golly, we're going to go to the golf simulator.
And from last week, we learned that, maybe you have trouble running down a baseline if you're playing softball, right?
Yes, I have to redeem myself in terms of sports.
Redeemed yourself, you did.
Yes. So we get there and you guys really want me to play. And I'm like, I'm going to embarrass. Of course, there's all these, like guys in there who are, golfers and, with their buddies and whatever. I just was mortified. Anyways, I ended up kicking both of your butts.
You did.
Now, granted, it was a silly little game which required no skill, but
No, it did take skill. I mean, swinging a golf club's tough. I mean, it really is.
Oh, it's awful. It's the most awkward thing I've ever done. But the two of you swore that I actually had a natural swing, maybe, even though it felt completely unnatural.
And, the experience at the simulator also reinforced the fact that you are a good athlete. I mean, you really are.
All right, whatever. Anyways.
Your swing was very natural. I mean, our son even said so.
He did. That was probably, the best moment of the whole weekend. But yes, so I needed to redeem myself in terms of my athletic ability and also just give you a little shade.
Yeah, and congratulations.
As the loser of the golf simulator.
Me and the Red Sox are losers.
That's right. That's right. So as we mentioned, we did get to take a quick trip up to Boston for the weekend. And while we were there, we actually took an opportunity to go about town, your favorite city, one of our favorite cities, to do some video filming, and we'll see if our media folks can make any sense of it. But one thing I thought we could talk about in the opening, in light of our interview today with Robert Arnold, and also just our trip that we took, as we traveled around to different sites, historical sites to do little video snippets. And then as we, were reading Robert's book and just current events and other things that we're reading, I don't know, we talked a little bit about this earlier in the day, that I'm just having trouble really believing anymore in the fairy tale that we were taught as kids about our democracy, about our founding fathers. I feel like I'm just seeing everything through such jaded eyes anymore. Right. And it's really kind of bothering me, to be honest.
Yeah. We were talking about this as we were prepping for the interview today. And again, we interviewed Robert Arnold. He's got a book out titled Defiance Till Death. But we did talk about it, and you brought up an excellent point about, you asked the question, and it's an honest question. Have we truly ever had a democracy?
Well, or a government, by the people and for the people, as we
yeah.
were taught growing up. It's like, has it really ever been that way, or is it always been just a playground for the privileged
Yeah.
to work the system to their advantage?
And that's the real answer, is that, this democracy, as it came to be defined, was established for the privileged. And there's just really no way of getting around that. I mean, the Constitution was for white male landowners who got to say in this democracy and putting this country together. And so it's always kind of been skewed by that. And then you brought up the point even before, the revolution and how the colonies were established, that to just get here, you had to have some type of privilege to come over from Europe to the Americas.
Right. I mean, and I just want to say also, don't get me wrong. I've never been naive about the fact that the country was founded, as we've talked about many times, on stolen land and stolen labor.
Right.
But again, growing up, I just was always, we were taught that we were working to do better, and we were working to provide more rights for all people and equality and equity and all of these things. And and looking back, it's just like, was that really ever the case? I'm sorry, I'm just in a bad place right now about all this, but was it?
Yeah, but I think that is a genuine and real question that needs to be answered. And the reality is, as we've already stated, is that no, it was not a bastion for equality as, we were sold, growing up as kids. But here's also the reality that the founders were sons and daughters of the Enlightenment. And so this democracy that we do celebrate began as an ideal. It was never a perfect ideal. It was always skewed towards the privilege. But the genius of the founders is that they instilled this ideal with the hope that it would evolve over time. And we've talked about the paradox of the founders, especially those who were children of the Enlightenment, such as Jefferson and Madison and Washington, but were also still slaveholders. And, just the contradiction and the hypocrisy of that ideal. But it still was an ideal. And for me, the genius of the Constitution are in those words, striving towards a more perfect union. The recognition that it is never perfect. But the hope of this ideal is that we will continue to be more inclusive, and that this democracy will continue to give rights to more and more people, and to level the playing field economically and socially and legally for everybody. That, to me, is the genius of the United States. Has it always been that way? No. Has it always been a struggle? Yes. Have the privileged and powerful and wealthy been willing to give up their power and privilege? No. The oppressed have always had to fight for their rights, have always had to fight for their equality, but that is the struggle. So it began as an ideal. It began as this principle that hopefully would evolve over time. And that has been the continued struggle. And that is the fight that we are facing today. This ruling class that wants us to take the country back, where the ruling class has even more authority and more power and more privilege, while the rest of us just fall in line. And I think there's a growing multitude, and Robert speaks about this today in our interview, that there's a growing multitude that says, hell no, that we have rights, we have privileges. And that is the promise of the Constitution. Not that it's always gotten it right, but it's given us something to strive for. And we're not going to give away that very fact. In fact, in our conversation today, he mentions when people have the taste of freedom, they are unwilling to give that up. And I've spoken about this on this podcast before. I've written about it in my time over in Ukraine this last year. And speaking to the Ukrainian people when they said, we've only tasted freedom for a few decades. But now that we have the taste for it, we are never going to give it up. We are going to fight and fight and fight if someone tries to take it from us. And that is what Putin and Russia is trying to do right now. And that is what we have to do. We have to fight for our rights. We have to fight for our freedoms and for our equality. And that's why I am so passionate and why we are privileged enough to encounter people like Robert and others who remind us that we must fight and stay engaged in this experiment known as America.
Well, and like, our friend Sky Perryman says at Democracy Forward, and others have said as well, that, democracy is not a spectator sport.
Absolutely
and I think just
not.
for so long, for my lifetime, that's been a given and an understood, is that it was just there and it would always be there for us. And it's upsetting, I feel convicted about that. But here we are learning that in very real time and in very real ways.
Yeah. So, Misty, I think you're absolutely right in asking the question, have we ever had a government for the people and by the people? And that's important because it's not always been about everybody, but it's also been a challenge for us to try to include more and more people. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so that's why this conversation today leads so perfectly into our interview with Robert Arnold. And before we get started with the interview, to our listeners, if you have not seen any of his videos on his social media, whether it's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, or whatever, put a pause, go watch a couple of his videos. They are absolute brilliance. And I love the way he communicates and makes me think. And challenges, some of the ideals that I've held or have been taught, and, does offer some hope for us going forward.
So Missy and I will be right back with Robert Arnold to talk about his new book, Defiance Till Death, and the message that he is communicating to the world. As a former college baseball player, I know firsthand the challenges athletes face. That's why we're proud to support Christian Athlete Circles, a ministry that is creating spaces and resources to accompany athletes on their faith journey, wherever they are. To learn more about Christian Athlete Circles, go to ChristianAthleteCircles.org. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Robert Arnold is a writer, poet, speaker, and activist raised in the Mississippi Delta and shaped by the stories, struggles, and stubborn beauty of the South. His work lives at the crossroads of art, politics, and memory. He writes because it's the clearest way he knows to tell the truth, even when that truth is complicated, uncomfortable, or inconvenient. Robert's latest book is titled Defiance Till Death. Robert, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Hey, thank y'all so much for having me. I appreciate you.
So Robert, again, thanks for being here. Before we dive into the interview, I just need a moment of personal privilege to say, I think that you are able to communicate what so many of us are thinking, but in a moment aren't able to articulate. I was telling Mitch earlier that I feel like you string words together like Beethoven would, compose a symphony.
Oh.
And so here's what I need. I've got a little bit of a business idea, and you just need to hear me out for a moment. So, when we're in those moments, especially being from the part of the country that we are all from, we get the vernacular, we get the headspace, right? And when I don't have the words to say, I need the little, the staples button, it's easy, but I need all of your essays, just a button. And whenever something comes up, I just need to hit play. And for you to say your essays. Yeah. So we're gonna workshop that a little bit, and so we'll circle back.
I'm gonna send that over to Margaret. We're gonna get that going.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
You need the Robert Arnold button.
Okay. So now let's turn our attention to you. Like I said, we are from a similar area of the country, the South. When I say broadly, because people will argue with me about whether my part of the country is Midwest or South, I would consider South. So, anyways. You have a way of communicating, like I said, to especially this culture that we find ourselves immersed in. And so I want our listeners to understand where it is that you come from, your community kind of that raised you. So talk to us a little bit about your foundation and how, your upbringing has impacted your passion and your work.
Sure. So I was raised in Helena, Arkansas, which is just south of Memphis, in the Mississippi River Delta. Very small rural farm town that was once a very thriving area, which is an odd dichotomy. We have the highest poverty rate in the state, and at one time had the highest number of millionaires per capita.
Wow.
And so it's a very strange dynamic you have at play there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's oddly enough a very democratic voting area of the world, but that is because the demographics are somewhere there with 75% black. It, it's it's all old rural farm area.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very conservative aspect to the way I was raised in that. But I was raised in that kind of 90s Christian. My mom listened to Sandy Patty every time we got in the car, that kind
Oh
of thing.
yeah,
Relatable, yes.
And so,
absolutely.
yeah. So I was raised in that, which I tell people, and it's kind of become almost a meme at this point that we're products of that era, and they told us what Jesus said and we believed it, kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now they've kind of changed their mind on it somehow. But that's what I grew up out of
Mm-hmm.
was that, and now we've got, my sister and I are both very progressive and liberal, and I say that my parents are Republicans, but not really. They just say that they are. They don't
Mm-hmm.
believe any of that stuff, because they are deeply good people. They would give you the shirt off their back if you were in
Sure.
front of them, and if someone was struggling in front of them, they would certainly help that person. Those are the people that raised me, and I most of my ideals as far as the way people should be treated come from my Aunt Ernestine. She was she ran the cafeteria at one of the elementary schools. Uh, she is the closest thing that I think exists to someone that behaves in a Christ-like manner.
Mm-hmm.
She believed in fairness for everybody. She lived it every day, and that is the person that I have always thought had it figured out. And
Right.
if there were anybody to model myself after, it would be her. Now I'm
Yeah.
nowhere close to that. I don't mean to say that I am, but
Yeah.
that sort of inherent goodness
Yeah.
is what I think we should strive for.
That's such an interesting point because, Missy grew up in Texas. I grew up in Oklahoma. So similar cultures. Now, we both grew up in the city, but all three of us kind of grew up in that, what would, define as conservative culture. But it was a conservatism that was traditional. It wasn't like the conservatism as it is defined today, which I don't think is conservatism at all. But those values that we held, close, and really the value of helping your neighbor and respecting each other and respecting diversity and trying to understand you're part of a larger community that relies on one another, helps one another. And I often told, my family as they began to hear and read the things that I would write and say that were more progressively, minded, was that it was really their fault that I turned out the way I did because those values were instilled in us. And it sounds like that's very similar to your upbringing.
It's almost identical.
And, as Missy said in the beginning of this, you have an incredible gift of putting your words down, and the way you communicate is absolutely brilliant. Again, congratulations on the book, Defiance
Thank
Till
you very
Death.
much.
It is an incredible collection of your essays that you've put together in this book. But I want to talk to you about your turn to social media because, as a writer, I mean, we talked about, you putting pencil to paper. Now you've got this book published, but you're able to communicate through social media in ways that are just transcendent because you're able to get to the heart of the matter and speak truth to a broader audience. So what made you decide to turn to social media as a platform to communicate your thoughts?
Right after the election, I had a friend whose parents are a lot like mine. We're from the same town.
Mhm.
And they had asked me, one, what it was about this administration that their parents were so attached to, and why they couldn't see that it didn't work. And so I wrote a thing about it, and I was trying to explain it to them, and then I wrote a piece about it, kind of for myself a little bit.
Mhm.
And I reached back out and I said, "Hey, let me send this to your parents. Let me send this. I think I can maybe make something here." And they said, "Well, okay, but they're not going to read it." I said, "I tell you what, I'm going to record me reading it,
Yeah.
and then they'll listen to it. Like I've known them my whole life, like they'll listen to it."
Yeah.
And so I did that, and so I sent it off, and as I was there with it on my phone, scrolling through TikTok, or
Mhm.
I thought, well, this might be helpful to somebody else. I will post it to TikTok. I had no intentions of really doing anything with it, but at least I guess it would be there. I don't know what possessed me because I'm not a social media person. I
Sure.
didn't, and so I put it out there, and it got, uh, I think like 10 or 15,000 views or something
Yeah.
in a
Wow.
Yeah.
couple of
It
days.
was amazing.
uh, which now seems very low. At the time, I thought, "Wow, I'm famous now." And so people asked me to do another one, or if I had any views on, and so I just started taking some stuff that I had written and
Mhm.
recording it and posting it. And gosh, that was in January,
Mhm.
end of January, 1st of February. That turned into 100,000 followers, and
Wow.
by March, and now I think I'm pushing 400,000, I think, on TikTok or something like that.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting progression, a very quick
Right.
progression on it. So I wish there was a better answer for why I turned to social media. There wasn't some grand plan as far as I'm going to use this as an outlet to kind of get the message out there. I just kind of fell into it, and then I found that there was a lot of people that could relate to what I was saying.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know if it's arrogance or if it's just not understanding how people thought. I kind of just assumed that most people saw things the way I did, and I think they do. But I don't know if maybe there's a difficulty in translating it
Mhm.
plainly, and so I think people just connect with a message that's not necessarily angry. It's not shouted at them, and it does provide maybe a little bit of clarity to some noise
Absolutely.
that exists.
So let's talk a little bit about the book now.
Sure.
So like we mentioned before, it's a collection of your essays covering, myriad of topics. But one of the things I want to start off with is that you talk about our culture's unwillingness to think critically. And you wrote, we teach our kids to say the pledge, but not to understand it. We have become a nation more interested in teaching obedience than curiosity. Talk to us a little bit about that. That's really profound.
I think it was last year I was playing in a golf tournament, and we stood up and they did the Pledge of Allegiance before the golf tournament. I thought, what on earth are we doing?
Yeah.
And I didn't I didn't participate. I
Mhm.
thought this is absurd. I'm 40 years old. I'm not saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And there wasn't even a flag. There's a flag, like, look over here. I think there's a flag on this.
Hole
And I'm
number
going,
one, you pledged.
this is this is crazy. And I've just thought the absurdity of what we've turned into as far
Yeah.
as this. Um, there is something pleasant about having a Pledge of Allegiance
Mhm.
that kind of says these are the ideals that we have. And these are the things um, that we ground ourselves in, and we teach that to our kids at first, second grade, and they carry it their entire lives. But we never explain the words to them. We never get into the reason that you should have certain civic pride and why you should feel good about it. It has nothing to do with a flag or an- a, a national anthem or any, like,
Mhm.
your pride should be rooted in our duty to each other and
Mhm.
what we do as far as neighbors and the rights and stuff that are enshrined, and the idea that we are supposed to be improving
Yeah.
on this experiment in democracy and freedom as we progress through through our time here. We're supposed to be getting better, and those are the things we should be taking pride in. So if you want to say a pledge of allegiance and feel good about yourself, at least for the right reasons, and not just because we've convinced ourselves that we're so star spangled amazing that nothing else has ever been good.
It's almost about whether you're willing to say it and to recite the words rather than to understand what the pledge actually means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean a blind loyalty or allegiance. It means that you are committed to defending the Constitution as well as committed to making this country a better, more perfect union for everybody, not just the privileged. And so, your point is so valid that we need to teach more about what that means instead of just blind fidelity to the Star Spangled Banner, as you put it.
The conversations we have aren't grounded anymore. We don't found them in our original beliefs, the founders' original beliefs that, laws should be shields, not cages. And are we building our society with that in mind?
Mhm.
Are we working toward the better, the overall good, the common will, as Rousseau would have said? Or are we just compounding ideas that serve ourselves and then eventually serve a wealthier class? Or are we doing the most for the least?
Mhm.
And, you know, I don't believe that I don't believe that any government should be founded on any sort of religious ideals. I think
Right.
that morality dictates itself, and there's a difference between morality and law. Law shouldn't dictate right and wrong. That's morality's purpose, and that's subjective, and that's going to be different for every person.
Mhm.
Laws should exist only to protect personal freedoms and personal liberties. And when we start trying to legislate morality, uh, we you get into the fight of who's more pious, and there's always going to be somebody that's holier or that's more righteous, and then
Mhm.
that line just keeps getting pushed.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about critical thinking or the idea of understanding what we're doing and not just having a blind faith to it, is
Mhm.
that I think that we should still be having these conversations,
Yeah.
and we should be having them around every law that's made, around every decision that's made for us, whether it's in our best interest or if it's in the interest of someone else. And so I think that the discourse that was had in 1776 and in 1787 should continue today.
Amen.
That we're supposed to fight with that still,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes people forget that that the Constitution wasn't the first set of law, and we had the Articles of Confederation that
Mhm.
failed, and then we have the Constitution, and the Constitution was hotly debated. Um, it was only ratified with promises that we would add stuff to it,
Right.
and so the anti-federalist arguments are very valid. They're the same things that we struggle with in 2025. The ideas of whether or not a standing army should be allowed to be wielded by the president at will. I mean, we're having that conversation today in
Absolutely.
Oregon right now.
Yeah.
So, I just think that if we teach our children what we're built on, if
Mhm.
we teach them to have those critical thoughts and to argue and to understand that while we do take a certain amount of pride in our nation, that there is no perfect form of government, and the experiment that we are in, this governance that we've chosen, it is a conversation. It's a continued conversation,
Mhm.
and that you can't just accept it in blind faith that it's perfect, and it was perfect in
Right.
1776 or 1787, either one. You have to keep having the conversations,
Yeah.
and we've turned it almost into a religion, like a faith,
Sure.
and that's my problem with it.
Yeah. Well, one of those conversations that is reoccurring in the book is that of a rigged economy, and you write about that. And I know this question is going to be in your wheelhouse, but you talk about kind of the lies that the American public has been sold, from trickle down economics to unrestricted capitalism, and one of the things that you point out is that this is a lie that both parties have been subject to over the course of our history. So, can you describe your thoughts on, the economy that we currently have and some of the lies that we've been sold and how this hurts the common person? Robert, you do such a good job of explaining that.
Milton Friedman is the father of neoliberalism, the Reagan trickle down economics. That's the Chicago school of
Hmm.
economics, so to speak. And so I think the theory there is sound. If you provide no boundaries to the job creation class, to the ruling class, that they will use that goodwill to pay people more and whatever. Like, it sounds great. It doesn't work because human greed exists. So,
Right.
uh, in 1982, Reagan deregulated Wall Street. And I said Reagan. Friedman deregulated Wall Street, and Reagan was a useful idiot. And I don't mean Reagan was actually an idiot. Like, he's a perfectly charming man, uh, but uh, he didn't come up with any of the economic theory
Right.
that he pushed through. Like, he just was the mouthpiece for it.
Sure.
So when you deregulated Wall Street, they allowed them to do stock buybacks,
Hmm.
which that's kind of the start of the rigging of the American economy. That, you can make arguments for it before that. They did it with tariffs and the Gilded Age, and the uh, the exploitation of workers and labor for generations. But the modern economy, with the way we look at the stock market, and the way we view our economic health and growth in the United States, starts really in the 80s with that deregulation of Wall Street and then being able to do whatever they wanted to. And so, real quick, with stock buybacks, it just artificially inflates the value of a stock, the EPS manipulation on it.
Hmm.
And so, once you can do that, you can make it do whatever you want to, and it doesn't require any sort of job growth. It doesn't require sales increases. All it requires is you not having to pay taxes on loans or interest on loans, and you being able to do that, which prior to that was considered illegal. It was market manipulation, which it still is. Now it's just legal. So when I think that we have this economy that does not serve uh, anybody. We've created this idea that success is based on hard work. And so if you work really hard, one of these days you'll be a billionaire. You
Hmm.
cannot dig enough ditches to be a billionaire. Like, you
Right.
cannot labor hard enough to do that. So
Hmm.
billionaires' wealth is built off manipulation and exploitation. There's just no way around it.
Sure.
And so when I talk about a rigged economy, it is that you have a class of people, a wealthy class of people that have manipulated politics, Citizens United allowing corporations
Hmm.
to act as people, and that they get the same rights as people. Before then, it would be like the government versus corporations
Right.
for the people. But if a corporation is a person, now they're extended the exact same rights. And it just allows for those corporations and your wealthy elite to bend government to their will.
If you'll allow me, I think I've got a note here from the book. But you said history will not remember this as the moment the United States turned away from its allies, abandoned its principles, and chose a different path. Not fascism, not nationalism, but something older and crueler, the cold, calculated hunger of empire.
Now, that is still very true.
I feel like that's evergreen in this moment.
With the way that wealth has kind of controlled politics, geopolitically at this point,
Hmm.
national boundaries are something that really only matter for the citizens of it.
Hmm.
Everybody else, like the wealth class and all that, those don't bother them. So they're not as concerned with what it means to be a United States citizen. They're
Hmm.
not worried as what it means to be Russian. Like, those ideas don't carry any pride or value to them. They use it as a cudgel to beat us over the head, but
Hmm.
it doesn't mean anything to them.
as we bring this to a close, our conversation to a close, tell us about your hope. Where do you see hope in this world of ours? Because it does seem really, really dark right now, Robert. So tell us where that hope is and how can our listeners wield it to their advantage?
It's the last thing we give up. It really is. And it's the first thing we reach for. There's an Emily Dickinson poem called "Hope is a Thing with Feathers,"
Yeah.
and it uses the metaphor of a bird in your heart that you can feel it. It's always there, and even in the darkest of times, you will feel it. And so I believe that. I think that's the hope is the thing that gets us up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that keeps us having these conversations and looking toward a better day.
Robert Arnold, it's always a pleasure. I always learn something when we talk to you. It's been a joy talking to you today. It's been tough at times hearing some of the difficulties that we're going through. But like I said, I always learn something from you, and I'm inspired by your words and your work. But before we let you go, Robert, we got one last question for you. Missy has the honor of asking it, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
So, Robert, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
I'm working with Blackwing pencils. We talked about that before the show. They make really quality high-end pencils, I guess. But I get to do some work with them on some ambassadorships, and we work with their foundation to hopefully spread some literacy and offer maybe some scholarships in the very near future for students to improve literacy and work with some K through 12 programs in schools, public schools, starting around Arkansas and then moving to some other states to promote that and hopefully get kids putting pencil to paper again and writing. So I'm very excited about that. And so there's some more hope that we will have children of the next generation doing the same things.
I love that.
I love it. A pencil deal.
A pencil deal.
Congratulations,
I got a pencil deal.
friend. I love it.
That's absolutely great. So besides your social media platforms, where can our audience find out more about you and your work?
You can go to robertarnold.com. That'll have all of it's kind of a condensed area.
Yep.
It'll have all my socials on there, but it'll also have calendar of events and the other stuff we're working on, writers workshops and programs like that. You can find out about the foundation with Blackwing and all that kind of stuff on the website. So that's the best way to do it.
Terrific.
And then Substack is Robert L. Arnold. YouTube is Robert Arnold. And then Defiance 13 on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes and the links to it all so our audience can get to you and find out more about it. And again, the book that is brand new. It's titled Defiance Till Death. It is excellent. And Robert, thank you so much for being with us this week. And thank you for your work. It is just so valuable and needed at this time in this moment.
Well, thank you all very much for having me. I certainly appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
And to our audience, we want to thank you for tuning in this week. And until next week, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.